Good evening and welcome to He Knows. I'm Chris, your host, and tonight we're going to go over just a few of the local and world events that are happening in the world. Then we're going to go back and talk a little bit more about Miles Guo, focusing specifically on Joe Low and how low can Joe Low go, which is pretty low. And then we're going to tie it in with how things seem to have turned out and see what kind of connections we might be able to make. The first item up for chit chat with respect to local news is Biden, Joe Biden. Of course, Joe Biden has pardoned his criminal son, Hunter Biden. Let me rephrase that. Joe Biden has pardoned his crackhead, gun-toting, gun-throwing away criminal son, Hunter Biden. Yes, he is guilty of all that stuff. He did throw a gun in the trash can, trying to get rid of it after he had illegally obtained it by lying on forms in order to make the purchase. He's a well-known crackhead. There's plenty of videos running around out there of him arguing with hookers and strippers of exactly how much crack they have to share, and is also well-known in talking about the Parmesan cheese that he tried to smoke because he thought that was crack that he found in the carpeting. Yeah, it's pretty sad state of affairs for the president. Pretty sad state of affairs for the country. Now, it's interesting because Joe Biden had claimed all along, "I'm not going to pardon my son." And this is after he had already been found guilty. And the only reason they actually had to try him because of the view of impropriety that was coming up, in that Hunter was clearly guilty of a whole host of different things. They were trying to wait out the statute of limitations on a number of these things, I am sure. But the only one that really appeared to be surprised by this whole thing was the absolutely worst press secretary in the history of the United States, Karine Jean-Pierre. This useless human being seemed to be so surprised and shocked when Joe Biden pardoned his son that she really didn't have a whole lot to say. Fox News' Peter Doocy asked about that, and she really couldn't say anything and just up and walked out the room. So, is this a good thing for Hunter Biden? Well, here's where my opinion comes in. No, it's really, really not. It's more of a good thing for Joe Biden, because if you remember, pardon me, if you remember, Hunter Biden is absolutely on record as saying, plus we've got to give 10% for the big guy. There is no question that Joe Biden, with his influence, had been peddling his power to foreign countries like China and Russia and others, trying to make absolutely Ukraine. We can't forget Ukraine. And it just seems very, very coincidental that this pardon goes back to 2014. If you recall, 2014 is in the height of Joe Biden's in charge of all things Ukraine. And it also just so happens to be the time that Hunter Biden became a member of the board of directors of Burisma. A guy, Hunter Biden, who had zero understanding or experience in anything energy related. Suddenly he's on the board of directors. If this isn't a you pat my back, I'll pat your back, I really don't know what it is. Our second story is Democrats and media sharks, sorry, I repeat myself, are trying to chum the waters in the takedown of Pete Hegseth as the nomination for Department of Defense. This is not unexpected. They went after Matt Gaetz pretty quickly, and Matt, I don't know if he was justified in taking his name out, but he did so rather quickly without much of a fight. Very, very quickly, the Sharks and the media, again, I repeat myself, went after the next person on their list, which happened to be Pete Hegseth. Now, Pete Hegseth is on the show in the morning on Fox News, and has a long history of being involved in the military. He is a member of Special Forces and has Bronze Stars, is well versed in all things military, and has been pretty public about saying that he wants to take out woke generals. Now, these woke generals, of course, are worried about their careers, and they became generals because of their noses being firmly implanted in the backsides of those who could give them promotions. This is why they are woke. Never having accomplished anything other than that, became generals, became in places of power, and now they're worried about losing their status. So they are doing their best to try and spread fear, spread panic amongst those who have the ability, have the ability to sort of submarine the nomination of Pete Hegseth. A couple of those people, in my opinion, that are losers that are involved in this, one of them that stands out really quickly is Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst is the senator, one of the two senators from Iowa, and she has been very, very critical of the Pete Hegseth nomination. I don't know why, other than she is exposing herself to be a horrible Republican. One might call her a rhino, a Republican in name only. A couple of the other likely and usual suspects that go completely against anything real Republicans want, real conservatives want, is Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Senator of Alaska, and finally Susan Collins of Maine. My apologies. So Lisa Murkowski is a senator from Alaska, and she's never on board with Republicans, it seems. Anytime the difficult votes comes up, she always seems to side with Democrats. Susan Collins is less so like that, but she's one of those people that you just can't count on. You don't know where she's going to fall. Now, the thing about Democrats that I somewhat admire is that they are in complete lockstep when they make a decision to go a certain way on a vote. You will find very, very few Democrats going against the grain, whereas with Republicans, you don't have that. Now, one might say that, well, that's free thinking, that's free will, that's the ability to go against the grain, go with what their heart tells them to do. One might also say that they're trying to torpedo an incoming administration that has a plan to make America great again. That is personally my opinion, and unfortunately, we're in a position to where it may come down to our vice president-elect making the final vote in order to approve these nominations. Let's hope it doesn't get to that. Let's hope that somebody can talk some sense into Lisa Murkowski, maybe even Susan Collins. But Joni Ernst, man, I hope she turns around. I really do. Our next story is France. France is having some political troubles right now. 3 months into the tenure of Prime Minister Michel Barnier, he has been ousted with a vote of no confidence, and this is sending the French government kind of into a tizzy, turmoil. I don't expect him to go away really quickly because that sniveling President Macron has to come up with a new nominee, probably be just as bad or worse than the last nominee. And, well, I don't have a whole lot of hope that France is ever going to turn around. South Korea was kind of an interesting week. South Korea instituted martial law. Their president there instituted martial law. It only lasted a few hours, though. It appears that it was a response to a showdown between opposition parties. The opposition was having activities that the ruling power did not like. activities that included the media, the labor parties, having public gatherings. And in true North Korean style, in true CCP style, they decided to shut those down with martial law. Now, again, it only lasted for a short period of time, but this is the kind of thing you don't expect from a free country. You don't expect these kinds of things in a place that somewhat calls themselves a democracy. You expect this in June 6, 1989, Tiananmen Square. You expect this in communist Russia. You expect this in North Korea, not in a free country. So tonight, we're going to move on and we're going to talk about Zhou Lo. Zhou Lo is an interesting character, and before we get into Zhou, I'm going to explain a little bit about what is referred to as 1MDB, which is a huge scandal. And Zhou Lo is right in the center of this. Now, 1MDB is the Malaysia bilking of their retirement funds to the tune of about $4.5 billion. That's billion dollars. The $4.5 billion, they tried to invest it in things that Zhou Lo had factuously set up, completely fabricated these investment opportunities, and Malaysia went for it hook, line, and sinker. Of course, they showed them, like they do with any Ponzi scheme, they showed them that they were earning money, that things were going great, things were growing, until they pulled the rug out from under them. Kind of sounds like a lot of the crypto scams lately to me, but just in an older way of doing it. So Zhou Lo happens to be the illegitimate son of Meng Jiangzhu. Now, Meng Jiangzhu is, of course, another CCP head. He's not the top guy, but he's one of those close to the top guy, and he's out of the Shanghai area. So Meng Jiangzhu, and we're going to have a video on him upcoming, but to give you an understanding, Zhou Lo bilked Malaysia out of $4.5 billion. And then, of course, where did he go? He brought all that money with him over to America, where he started throwing it around. Now, what's some of the stuff that he did with that money? Well, pardon me. Let me take a drink real quick. Part of what he did with that money is he was dating a supermodel, Miranda Kerr, and gifted her about $8 million in jewelry. Now, he didn't date her for a long period of time. I think it was about 8 or 10 months or so. But in that short period of time, that's a heck of a return on her investment, right? I wonder what he got for his investment of $8 million. Other things is he had some connection with Kim Kardashian. I don't know how much of a connection because we know what she's famous for, but she was given enough money to purchase herself a Ferrari. In addition to that, we know that Zhou Lo became buddy-buddy with Leo DiCaprio. And as a matter of fact, he completely financed the movie, The Wolf of Wall Street. Pretty good movie. Leo did some great acting in that movie. But all of that money that sponsored that movie was ill-gotten gains. So let's talk about, or let's go ahead and show our first video tonight. And this video is a little bit about the 4 impacts that Zhou Lo has had on the situation with Miles Guo. Please go ahead.
这鸠肉，我原来我说这个鸠肉他亲爹是这个孟建柱说，美国最高的一个情报的领导亲自说。 为啥我都信？这我不信了，这有点，这到底是真是假呀？而这我不信。我在过去直播时候，我说我告诉你这是真的。我也有战略性的这个爆料，但是呢，咱走着看。他现在他深信不疑了。啊，酒肉事件太大了，这是整个孟建柱、整个孙立军、整个上海帮、海外蓝金黄控制情报系统几10年来， 洗黑钱、赌博、黑社会，利用泛亚裔珠宝这样的金融平台把钱吧唧给你洗出去，控制东南亚，就是那个我说事情的砖呐、金砖呐、那家伙，你们要看那视频啊，你们没法相信，我都不相信，说实话，那太吓人了，那家伙金砖。啊，比咱们吃的米饭都多，你这还了得了这玩意儿？这都在是孟建柱，甚至绝对是这个级别的啊。第二件事情是大家海航事件，这海航事件救漏会把高盛搞垮，很有可能；海航可能把黑石搞垮。这是美国的两个最牛的金融机构，这简直太大了。这个爆料的意义大家没明白啊！你去想想，第三件事情啊，就是王建之死。王建之死，这事太大了啊！这个西方人现在越法国人不愿意了，现在法国人坐着找我啊！明天下周四。下周三全是跟法国相关部门见面，人家是干嘛？旅游来，说我不是官方的，我旅游，我想跟你见面。现在跟他见面，为什么？谁都不想担责任，这绝对是大事儿啊！还有第四就是吴征啊 ，Bernard Wu， 哎呦，现在这个吴征越来越大了。现在这个吴征啊，现在相关政府在查他跟美国雇佣美国官员，竟然有 FBI 的前官员跟他被他雇佣，叫七星媒体，你说可怕不可怕啊？然后呢，吴征所谓的拯救了几万个犹太人的他爷爷，这事也成为焦点。然后吴征在西方的交战人埃利波利啊，这个。Nico Lam Davis 是咱们这个同胞香港人，那个间谍，女间谍啊，这个跟那个艾利波蒂的 partner 啊，这多大呀？这艾利波蒂，这个 Nico Lam Davis， 还有吴征这一起的，在美国要把我遣返，要帮助这个救漏平事儿，然后搞那么大腐败，这个案子在美国来讲，它不可思议的。
Now, towards the end of that video, Miles was telling us about Wang Jian's death again. And what's interesting is he mentioned that now French people are coming to see me. Now, if you remember, Xiang Wang Jiang, he was the one of the members of the corporation that died for HNA. And after he was killed, that's when they arrested the former president of Interpol. Now, it seems to me like the French should have started asking a whole lot of questions, and it sounds like they did. And under the fake pretense of wanting to learn about tourism and why they were interested in why the French officials were interested in talking to Miles about tourism makes absolutely no sense to me. And I'm sure Miles knew that too, because one of his first words, the word "for what?" So it seems to me like they understood that Miles was the target in everything that had happened on French soil, specifically with the president of Interpol disappearing and then being convicted on quote unquote corruption charges, and also the death of Wang Jian. So it's pretty easy to come to the conclusion that the French are wanting to know what in the hell is going on and why all this stuff is happening the way it is, because the French soil is being tied into this, Interpol is being tied into this, and it's all because of some CCP conspiracy in order to get Miles Gold back on Chinese soil. And I think they probably figured that out pretty quickly. So just after discussing the French coming to see him, Miles brings up Wu Zheng, in America known as Bruno Wu. Now, Bruno Wu is another American, Chinese businessman in America. with seemingly strong ties to the CCP. And he has been involved in a company by the name of, I had it here. Let me see. I can't find it at the moment. Ideanomics. And he also seems to have then gotten involved in something called Seven Sun Stars. Now, Bruno Wu, let's go ahead and bring up our overlay that we have. All right. Here it comes.
说刘特佐
No, that's not.
是
That's not
当
the
时的
overlay.
妈妈
Let's the next
找
video.
一个老
Let's do
乡
the
去看望
overlay,
去
the，
给
picture.
孟建柱做饭。这孟建柱
There we go. Okay, so we can see Miles, the bigger picture in the middle, and he is bordered in blue. Now, just above Miles is Wu Zheng. Wu Zheng from Seven Stars Media, also of Ideanomics. Ideanomics was the fraudster company that he started with in America that moved from fintech to electric vehicles and other things. And then by the time that was all said and done, they decided to move over to Seven Stars. In other words, everything that they did was fraudulent and basically just a CCP clearinghouse for making bribes to American officials. And we'll see that a little bit as we go here. Sorry for the coughing, folks. So Bruno Wu is attached to Sam Nunberg. Sam Nunberg was Wu's business partner. And what's interesting is all of these connections kind of flow through the same stopping point, which is Miles. We've got Zhou Lo, his father, Meng Jiangzhu, all connected to what then becomes government officials. Now, George Higginbotham was a Department of Justice official. And we've never heard of corruption in the Department of Justice, have we? Right? And then, of course, we've got Elliot Brody. Elliot Brody is also with the Department of Justice. And then we've got Sun Li Jun, who is based out of Shanghai, who's one of the big CCP officials there, who was in charge of getting Miles returned from America to Chinese soil. They were definitely trying to get him extradited. And there's a story about that coming up shortly. Then we've got Nikki Loom Davis, who is of originally of Hong Kong descent, came over to America and has been involved in the entertainment industry and is a businesswoman. Steve Wynn, he is a big casino tycoon. Elliot Brody was not only just involved in the Justice Department, he was a big part of the Republican National Committee. He was like the second chair, and then Steve Wynn was towards the top of one of those groups within the RNC. Now, what's interesting is that all of these people, Elliot Brody, George Higginbotham, Nikki Loom Davis, and casino tycoon Steve Wynn has plenty of problems on his own between his sexual trysts and being involved in this bribery scheme. Sun Li Jun comes into this. They basically, I think, here's my opinion now, Zhou Lo taking complete advantage of Malaysia and the $4.5 billion was then sent by his father, Meng Jiangzhu, over to America to start spreading some of that cash around. That's why it went to people like Kim Kardashian and Miranda Kerr and, the Wolf of Wall Street with Leo. And then he met a guy by the name of Pras Michel. Pras Michel is not on this image, but Pras Michel was one of the founding members of the R&B band, the Fugees, maybe a rap band. I'm really not clear on where they fall genre-wise. But Pras Michel, as one of the founding members, had been there a long time. Joe Low was very interested in meeting people that had any kind of power. And that's how he wound up meeting Pras Michel. He wanted to get in. Pras Michel was deeply involved in the music industry, and he wanted to be able to start meeting people that had some power. So Pras Michel somehow knew Nicky Loom Davis. Nicky Loom Davis knew Elliot Brody. And these four, between Joe Low, Nicky, Elliot Brody, and Pras Michel, all became a team. And the team, their center goal was to get Miles extradited back to China. It got so bad that Sun Lijun in Shanghai was getting so angry that the job hadn't been done yet that he, number one, sent people over to America to have a conversation with them, but that wasn't good enough because they still kept failing. So Elliot Brody had his connections through George Hickenbotham, but George Hickenbotham failed to get his connections in the DOJ to do anything about it. As a matter of fact, at the trial, Jeff Sessions, who used to be the Attorney General, the first Attorney General under Trump in his first term, basically was the door that couldn't be opened. Jeff got in the way. They couldn't get any further. They became a real roadblock. And I think, this is my take on it, I think because of the connection between Trump and Steve Bannon and Jeff Sessions and Miles Guo, that they knew exactly what they were trying to do. There was no question about it. So I believe that they tried to shut that down, and basically they let these people hang themselves. Pardon me. So Sun Lijun, not to be denied, called a meeting in Hong Kong. And so Elliot Brody and Nicky Loom Davis and Joe Low and Pras Michel all flew over to Hong Kong. There were some guarantees because Elliot Brody didn't want to do this for free. And in the end, Elliot Brody took about $9 million in order for him to be involved in what he was involved in. So his bribing, his price was $9 million. Nicky Loom Davis, just for clarity, was about $3 million. So the closer you got to the government, I guess the price goes up, which sort of isn't surprising, is it? George Higginbotham, I haven't seen the numbers that he took, but I'm sure it was a healthy sum because he was convicted of taking bribes and corruption as well. So they went to Hong Kong, and those four were waiting in the room and waiting and waiting and waiting. And they were like, okay, what's up? All of a sudden, they're basically told that they're going to get in a vehicle and they were going to drive. Where they were going to drive, though, was problematic because none of them had visas to get into China. But that's where they went. They went into Shanghai and they had a direct meeting with Sun Lijun, who was ticked off that they had not gotten him exactly what he wanted, which was Miles Guo back on Chinese soil. Well, this is all fallen apart. Everything went south. Nothing actually came of this other than Elliot Brody convicted on bribery and corruption. George Higginbotham convicted on bribery and corruption. Every one of these guys were also convicted of not being a registered foreign, I forget what the term is, but if you're not registered as a foreign quote unquote asset, there's a lot of trouble that you can be had for that. And so Nicky Loom Davis was also convicted of that as well. Now, Elliot Brody was given a pardon by Trump. I'm not so sure that, in my humble opinion, whether that was the right thing to do, because he was definitely trying to work the system to get the Chinese Communist Party what they wanted. Nicky Loom Davis, she's still in prison and has a way to go. She is not too happy that she was stuck in prison and Elliot Brody got a pardon. Interestingly enough, Pras Michel, a huge case, and was recently convicted on just this year on 10 counts, all 10 counts brought against him. Now there's some talk in that particular case about his defense lawyers not doing the job very well and botching the case, and so they're trying to get a new case. It's your typical stuff. But it seems to me like this guy's guilty of everything that he was accused of and stands to be sentenced to maybe 20 years behind bars. Federal prison. Not a fun time, I'm sure. All right. So who is Joe Low? How did he come about? Let's move on to our second video, which discusses who Joe Low's parents are.
说刘特佐是当时的妈妈找一个老乡去看望去，给孟建柱做饭。这孟建柱性情发作，这6块肌肉做了，跟他娘就是发生关系了。几天后，老娘回去了，结果怀上了他的孩子。哎，结果人家就这去了一趟，帮他做几顿饭，给做出一个孩子出来，这人就叫刘特佐。孟建柱在外面的私生子最起码是20-20个，大部分人在哪里呢？都在上海。就在上海这个在共青团的时候啊，红星农场的时候啊，哟，跟这种红星农场又成红的了。当时是孟建柱是逮着谁都睡，后来很多人来找他来。
It sounds like Meng Zhengzhu was quite the ladies' man. What do you know? Going over to your friend's house because she's got a guest in and trying to help him cook. And that's not all that was cooking. She wound up with a present of her own. And that present, 9 months later, became Joe Low. I'm not so sure that was a good trade-off for her, but I'm sure she was well taken care of. Because, well, as we know, Joe Low walked away with $4.5 billion. Now, I think I've heard that $1.5 billion have been returned to Malaysia, but where's the other $3 billion? That is a pretty good question. So it's also interesting that all of these people are connected in Shanghai. Yeah, Shanghai, where Meng Zhengzhu is, where Sun Lijun is, where Wang Qishan kind of hangs out. Southern China seems to be rife with corruption, especially if you've got Wang Qishan, little Wang, involved. It seems to me that these guys, Wang Qishan, we know he's got illegitimate children.
这个背后的所有的利益不是那么简单，
has
就像
his illegitimate
澳门的各个外国
and
人。
now Meng Zhengzhu. It seems like there's a lot of that running around. So much for family values, huh? Or maybe they just view family differently. I'm not sure. So our final video tonight talks a little bit in Miles' own words about who they're going after. Let's go ahead and play this video, and I'll have a few comments afterwards.
这个背后的所有的利益不是那么简单，就像澳门的各个外国来的赌厅赌王，能拿着信到美国总统那儿去，想办法遣返郭文贵。你们知道吗？有上百个美国名人，我在以前说过，大家没把我话听进去。上百个名人给美国白宫总统写信，要把我遣返。这100个人都不是省油的灯，省油的灯到不了美国白宫去。这些人背后和中国澳门黑白两道，以金融机构幕后的大亨们千丝万缕的关系。这些人背后有一个共同的影子，不一定是直接联系，是老板 纽约时报爆出了这个艾利波里这个如何作为一个共和党的一个募捐人财政委员会副主席，主席叫史蒂芬这个问，史蒂芬问呀，完了快破产了，性丑闻，这哥们儿也是犯罪分子，这是共和党的2大金主怎么和人吴征孙立军还有这个孟建柱、王岐山倾一国之力，通过马来西亚孟建柱的私生子叫 Jolo YMD 的偷盗者和马来西亚的政府一定要通过阿布扎比要通过阿布扎比没有配合，通过阿布扎比，然后腐败美国司法部，然后呢游说美国川普总统，游说白宫，以几百亿美元的身价，几十亿美元的公关费用，牵扯到了数百人现任的官员之多，采取不惜一切代价的手段出卖美国利益，要把文贵送回中国这个当中现在我手里有380张的文件，我还没有出呢，慢慢出，慢慢来。但从这个文件当中能看到，这个盗国贼对美国的蓝金黄是多么的严重多么的严重，对美国的国家的安全造成了多大的威胁。他因为文贵这个事件导致的蓝金黄项目的暴露，这在未来在美国的政治历史上那将是了不得的。
So we heard Miles mention in the first section of that video, which happened to be sections from 2 different days. The first section, he kind of mentioned Macau. We know Macau is a gambling capital of the world, just like Las Vegas. We know that Steve Wynn has been deeply involved in all things casino related. He's got them in Vegas. He's got them all over. I think he's even got one in Macau. So it seems to me very possible. And we know that the CCP has their tentacles into everything that makes money inside of Macau. So you know they're deeply embedded into the casinos inside of Macau. Therefore, they've got their tentacles into Steve Wynn, I believe. So, I always have to say I believe because I can't state it as fact. And this is all speculation, of course. However, with all of the action that's been going on, and since Steve Wynn happened to be the chair of the finance committee for the RNC, along with Elliot Brody, who was the RNC deputy finance chair, there's a lot of connection there to the Republican higher ups. Fortunately, we had somebody blocking the play. The Department of Justice appears to have been corrupted, not just in the Biden administration, but also all through history before that. Can you show me anywhere where the Department of Justice was actually not on the take? We can see it during Trump's first administration when we got people trying to take advantage and worm their way into getting into Trump's ears so that he would deport Miles back to China. He wasn't going to do that. I don't believe he was ever going to do that. My personal belief is that Trump is well aware of Miles, and I am very hopeful that when Trump gets back into a position and the DOJ is run by honest people and the FBI is run by honest people, that this stuff starts to change. Actually make the FBI go out and catch criminals. Go out and have the DOJ actually try criminals, not people who are trying to make the world a better place, not somebody who is working to take down the most corrupt organization on the face of the planet, which is the CCP. The corruption spreads far and wide all over the world. You've heard of the Silk Road. It's getting worse and worse. every country that China goes to, they say, oh, we'll build you a port. You just have to pay this note back for eternity. And the moment that a country can't make the payments on the note, China comes in and takes absolute control over that land, and the country in question has no more say over it. And then the real fraud starts. They start scamming the entire country out of its natural resources. So we can see that there was a lot of connection between those folks mentioned, between Bruno Wu, businessman, posing as a businessman in America, throwing low, pulled off this Ponzi scheme against Malaysia, bilking them of $4.5 billion. Now, it seems to me in all likelihood that with Meng Jiangsu being his father and having them see Trump, wouldn't let them get access to Trump. Now, as we know, that story changes the moment Trump comes out of power in 2020. The very moment that the Biden administration comes in, which had already been bought and paid for by the Chinese Communist Party, tenfold over, the Biden administration, the Biden DOJ, the Biden FBI owed the CCP because of all the money that they had funneled into Hunter, into James Biden, into Dr. Jill, into all of the Biden family members. That money needed to be accounted for, and they accounted for it by sending 100 FBI agents into Miles Guo's apartment at the Sherry Netherland Hotel. They arrested him and they burned his apartment. I want to thank you for joining me. I look forward to sharing my insights with you next time. I hope to see you there. Thank you.